Welcome to the Journeys of the Curious Traveler, Episode 4, Zimbabwe. Last time, I was flying out of the South African bush camp of Motswari Game Reserve. It was a small plane that landed on a random runway in the middle of the African bush. After getting picked up, we stopped at a couple of other small bush airstrips to pick up others, and then we were on our way to Kruger Mpumalanga Airport. This was my connection to Zimbabwe. So why am I going to Zimbabwe, you might ask? As always, when you hear the trumpets, that means I am taking a deeper dive into a historical, cultural, or religious tidbit with my journey. So why Zimbabwe? Zimbabwe is the location of one of the greatest natural wonder discoveries in the world. On November 16, 1855, the famous Scottish explorer David Livingstone discovered what he named Victoria Falls. He named it after Queen Victoria of Great Britain. During his lifetime, David Livingstone was one of, if not the most famous people in the world for his captivating explorations of Africa. Livingstone was looking for a navigable river across Africa. He was actively exploring the Zambezi River that feeds Victoria Falls. When he first viewed Victoria Falls, Livingstone was quoted as saying, "Scenes so lovely must have been gazed upon by angels in their flight." He was particularly struck by the immense columns of spray rising from the falls, which he described as a dense white cloud with two bright rainbows. He also noted the thunderous roar of the water as the perpetual mist that creates a unique rainforest-like environment around the falls. Locals refer to Victoria Falls as Mosi Oa Tunya, which translates to the smoke that thunders. This name is derived from the powerful mist and roaring sound produced by the waterfall as the Zambezi River plunges into the gorge. So now you know why I wanted to visit Zimbabwe. As usual, I fly to places that are not commonly visited by most Americans. I am often the only American or part of a very small minority of Americans. This was certainly the case in Zimbabwe. The flight from Kruger to Victoria Falls International Airport was about 2 hours. Since it's a different country, I would, of course, have to go through immigration passport control. Normally, before you land in a new country, the airline will pass out paperwork that needs to be completed on the flight. I got caught up in different things and didn't do this until I landed. It put me way behind, and I ended up at the back of the line of the immigration entrance. There was a really nice man at the airport that helped me fill out the form as we moved to the line, so I wouldn't get delayed any longer. He was so nice, I actually got a little suspicious after he said he would catch up with me on the other side of completing immigration. I thought, what? Why are you going to wait for me on the other side? He's not my guide. But my suspicions were unfounded. He was just making sure I made it through okay. I did end up catching up with my driver after clearing customs. I think it's okay to be trusting, but it's also important to be guarded as well in a new, unusual environment. A lot of different thoughts go through my head in these scenarios. Perhaps at the top of my concerning thoughts would be to go with someone at the airport that wasn't my proper contact. But it all turned out fine. I found my guide driver. His name was Duncan, and what a character he was. Where to start with Duncan? Our drive from the airport to my hotel was about 30 to 45 minutes. Like a real pro, Duncan filled that time by telling me all about the history of Zimbabwe. He started with the founder of the country, Robert Mugabe. Duncan explained that Mugabe was a hero of the people when he and his rebels took control of the country in 1980. But then he never let go as he went on to run Zimbabwe for 37 years until 2017. He was overthrown by a military coup at that time. Duncan said the country of Zimbabwe held the distinct record of being rated President Jimmy Carter's most corrupt elections he had ever witnessed. After his presidency, Jimmy Carter often monitored elections of third world countries to confirm whether they were honest and fair or whether they were corrupt. Duncan made his comments so tongue-in-cheek they made me laugh, but I had to gauge exactly where he was coming from. I had just met this guy. After a while, I concluded that he was most definitely critical of his country's past and present. Once I got to my hotel room, I was dying to research Zimbabwe a little deeper to better understand the country I was now in. In the 1960s, this area of Africa was known as Rhodesia. Southern Rhodesia became Zimbabwe after the Robert Mugabe Revolution in 1980. Northern Rhodesia became Zambia in the 1960s. Zimbabwe and Zambia are divided by the Zambezi River, with Zimbabwe on the south side of the river and Zambia on the north side. This is the mighty river that David Livingstone navigated 170 years ago when he found Victoria Falls. The name Rhodesia was named after the British South African explorer businessman named Cecil Rhodes. Just think about that for a second. The entire country was named after this man. The territory was founded in 1895 and then later dissolved in the 1960s and 1980s as mentioned. Ever since Mugabe's revolution in 1980, he promised free and fair elections for his people. The U.S. was one of the first countries to support the new country of Zimbabwe with diplomatic recognition. But the free and fair elections have never materialized, which has led to less than friendly relations with the United States through the years. At times, the U.S. has even applied trade sanctions on the country. This frosty relationship has led to Zimbabwe making other friends, primarily China and Russia. So this was new for me in my travels, to be in a country that considered Russia and China its two top friends, and the U.S. way down their list. On the other side of the Zambezi is Zambia. It's a different story. Zambia has long embraced free and fair elections and have been rewarded by better relations and treatment with other Western countries, such as the U.S. This has generally translated into a better economy and better opportunities for the people of Zambia. I had a couple of hours to rest at the hotel after my drop-off by Duncan. Then he came back as I had a sunset cruise lined up on the Zambezi that night. I asked Duncan how far the walk would be from my hotel to the Zambezi River. He said a couple of kilometers or about a mile. I asked him what he thought about me walking to the river the next day. He said, not a good idea because the animals coming out of the jungle or potentially near the river. Not only the danger of running into a big game animal like a buffalo, which are notorious for killing humans, but also there are large troops of baboons everywhere. I certainly saw this as we drove around Victoria Falls. On the Zimbabwe side of Victoria Falls, the city is called Victoria Falls. On the Zambia side of the falls, the city is called Livingstone. As Duncan and I resumed our constant talk of politics, I could certainly tell he was friendly to U.S. tourists as he joked about his country's sordid political history. He told me because my government can't do free and fair elections for the people, we aren't able to have closer relations with Western countries. We end up having China and Russia as our best friends, he said with a smirk. He said China is here to take all our great mineral rights in the land. They even built the current airport in Victoria Falls to better facilitate their business interests. He said they don't help the people of Zimbabwe with jobs, as they bring their own slave labor from China, which he referred to as their convicts that handle all the labor. All they do is pay the government, and the government keeps all the money for themselves, never helping the people. I thought to myself that at least he feels comfortable enough to talk like this in his country. Must mean free speech is tolerated. As we arrived at the Zambezi River and the riverboat, I parted with Duncan, who would be back to pick me up in about 3 hours. I just figured I would find a quiet corner of the boat and take in the sights of the river, but I was added to a big visiting group from Sweden. It was a group of about 10 female dentists who came to Zimbabwe to volunteer and help primitive, poor villages learn how to brush their teeth. What an excellent group of ladies. They were taking the Zambezi cruise as their reward for their work in Zimbabwe. They told me it's common for most people in these villages to lose all their teeth in their early 20s. So they were not there to do anything fancy, just simple brushing. We sat around a big couch together that was situated on the third deck of the riverboat, the top deck. Drinks were complimentary, and the boat's crew performed a few times for us, which was entertaining. On 3 or 4 occasions, we saw hippos in the river. 2 of the dentists were sisters and originally from Africa and immigrated to Sweden when they were young girls. They were originally from Johannesburg. As we were nearing sunset, we could see down the river a huge plume that looked like a cloud or a mist in the air. It was Victoria Falls. We took a lot of fun group pictures with all the stunning backdrops of the sunset on the Zambezi. When the cruise concluded, Duncan was waiting for me. By this stage, I had been in Africa for about 8 days, and my protein bars and nuts I packed were all gone. I am a finicky eater, so I asked Duncan if he would take me to a fast food place before he dropped me off at the hotel. We stopped at a place that had several restaurants and one lobby, chicken, pizza, tacos, and ice cream. I treated Duncan to a milkshake and took some chicken back to the hotel. All the Africans I came in contact with at Cape Town to Victoria Falls and all places in between were exceedingly nice people. I would say the nicest people I have met in all my travels around the world. It was no different at the fast food place that night. I feel like they all really liked Americans especially. While in the fast food place, there was a huge downpour of rain. Duncan got me back to the hotel where I was able to rest that evening in preparation for my big trip to Victoria Falls the next day. Duncan picked me up right on time the next morning. It was off season for Victoria Falls, so not as many people as usual. In February, when I visited, the Zambezi was about 60 to 70% normal capacity, so not as much water falling off Victoria Falls. For me, it was great. I could only imagine how it was during the busy season, though. Victoria Falls was truly spectacular. I would say that Iguaçu Falls in Brazil was a little more spectacular, but Victoria Falls is worthy of being one of the 7 wonders of nature. I like how Duncan explains the falls. He said, the falls are all owned by Zambia, but Zimbabwe owns the views. Most of the spectacular views can only be seen from the Zimbabwe side. These include the Devil's Cataract, Main Falls, Horseshoe Falls, and the Rainbow Falls, where rainbows are always present. I was glad to see Zimbabwe kept a big statue of David Livingstone near the famous falls he discovered for the rest of the world. As we walked around, to the various vantage points, it was wet and it was loud. Rain ponchos are standard issue when you visit the falls. There is a constant mist during many of the vantage points. Sometimes the thunder of the water hitting the ground was so loud it was hard to have conversations. Duncan and I not only talked about Zimbabwe politics, but he also asked a lot of questions about American politics and the new U.S. President, Donald Trump. He asked me if I thought Trump would stay in office past his second term. I told him absolutely not. The U.S. Constitution doesn't allow it. It's ironic to discuss this issue in Zimbabwe, though, as Duncan's country started off with hopes of democracy in the 1980s, but 45 years later, it still hasn't happened, as dictators and the military have continually ran the country. Duncan told me his youngest son was named Donald, but all the kids in school just called him Trump, he said. As someone who had been giving tours for 25 years, Duncan has seen it all in Victoria Falls. As he drove around town and walked around Victoria Falls, everyone seemed to know him. I asked him which tourist visits the most and who are his favorites. He said the Americans, Canadians, English, Australians, most all Europeans are all very kind to him during the tours. He said sometimes he has had bad experiences with tourists from India, Russia, and China. With Zimbabwe's close relationships with China and Russia, he said they get a lot of tourists from those countries. Duncan asked me if I knew why Chinese people spit so much. I was quizzical when he said that. I said, I've never heard of that. He said, yes, they spit all the time, even in the van. My response to him was, what? I found this cultural spitting thing very interesting, and I wanted to learn more about it. I took a deep dive into Chinese culture and spitting, and apparently these are some of the reasons why they do it. Number one, it's perceived as a cleansing action. Some Chinese people consider spitting a way to cleanse the body of excess fluids or impurities, aligning with the belief of better out than in. Number two, influences of traditional medicine beliefs. Traditional Chinese medicine emphasizes the balance of bodily fluids, and some may associate spitting with expelling excess phlegm or other substances to maintain this balance. This one reminded me of the craze for rhino horns back in China as a health solution. Number three, environmental factors. Poor air quality and smoking can lead to increased phlegm production, making some feel the need to spit more frequently. Number four, generational and socioeconomical factors. The practice may be more common among older generations and individuals from rural backgrounds who grew up in environments with less emphasis on public hygiene and limited access to facilities like public toilets and tissues. Number five, some Chinese regard the use of tissues and hankies as disturbing and poor hygiene instead of just spitting it. Number six, government campaigns are involved in changing these norms. Chinese authorities have launched campaigns to discourage public spitting, particularly in the major cities, highlighting health risks and encouraging more hygienic practices. Consequently, younger generations are less likely to spit in public. So there you go. I didn't have these answers for Duncan at the time. As Duncan wrapped up his tour of Victoria Falls with me, I asked if we could make another milkshake run, and we did. He dropped me off at my hotel for my last night in Africa. The next day, Duncan picked me up and escorted me through the airport, and we said our goodbyes. I began my long journey back to Phoenix, Arizona. The Victoria Falls flight to Cape Town was 3 hours long. From Cape Town to New York to Phoenix was almost 24 hours in the air. And so ended one of the most interesting and most educational trips I've ever enjoyed. Thank you for listening.